and welcome to Unapologetic Women, a podcast about current affairs, culture, politics, life, and how we got here, brought to you by Tony and Saoirse. These are unscripted conversations about the things that we care about, not the things that we're experts in. Oh, and there's probably going to be some swearing. Hey, Saoirse! Saoirse! How's it going?
It is going. I am just having my watch just started beeping at me that it's got water in it. So I'm turning the crown on the watch because that's a thing in my life. But other than that, I'm doing good. It's, I don't know, month 7,000 of the quarantine. But in Massachusetts, we get an update tomorrow from the governor.
Wait, and you're still under quarantine, right, in your state?
Yeah, we're still technically locked down, but the 18th of May is the day that he is giving a full update into like what the reopening phases are. And word on the street is that at least all of the beaches will be open for Memorial Day weekend, which is next weekend.
Oh, I read about that, like how Memorial Day is going to be is like such a tourist attraction, such a money-bringing event that it would kill businesses if they can't reopen. But at the same time, they will scared shitless, obviously, of reopening.
So we'll see. And we were with some people this weekend who they own a bar like down on the Cape, and he was saying that if they open with the current restrictions in place, they normally have 12 seats at the bar. They could only legally open with 4. And so he was like, I can't ask my staff to come and work for that when they work for tips.
Oh, of course, because in the American model, minimum wages plus tips. Yeah, that makes sense. I had not thought of that. That's such an interesting angle.
Yeah. And staff are coming back saying, well, I'm making more money on unemployment than I would be if I go back. So yeah, there's something very intense about what it looks like to reopen and how do businesses continue to survive if the requirement is that they open at 25% capacity. So yeah, that's where I've been at. It's
just fascinating how this whole pandemic is shining a light on what is wrong in America right now. I mean, that tweet that I shared with you, when was it last night, of like the number of people who've lost their healthcare because it's tied to their job and because they've lost their job. And it was like this long list of Belgium, 0, France, 0, UK, 0, Ireland, 0, America, 30,000. And you just go, oh, okay.
It's insane. Insane.
It's wild. It's bizarre being here in Canada because it's not, we've moved to our third Airbnb. We're in the middle of absolutely nowhere, like nowhere. Chilliwack. I don't even think that's how you pronounce it. But
I'm sorry, is that the name of the town?
Chilliwack. Yeah, that's where I currently am residing. Chilliwack.
Fantastic.
Because we've basically moved further and further out of Vancouver, the city, because it's just like it makes no sense. But I have to say, like, the shops are taking it really seriously. I had to go through a sanitization shower when I went into Safeway. Kid you not. The guy's like, put your hands in the air, and like just sprayed me with hand sanitizer, basically, like full on. And then proceeded to give me a chariot, like a trolley that he'd hand sanitized, was hand sanitized in front of me. Then he's like, here it is. And he's like, and now you have to follow the footpath in the shop. You can't diverge off of. And I was like, this is such a weird experience. But they took it really seriously. So it feels like the further out you go, because it wasn't like that in central Vancouver. Like there was a lot of things in place, like 3 or 4 people per shop, blah, blah, blah. But they're taking it to a whole new level here, which is quite interesting.
Can you say no to being sprayed with hand sanitizer?
I imagine so. It's Canada, so I imagine so. But I think it took me by surprise. I didn't even know what was happening before I got full spray on. Like a spray, it's like getting a spray tan, but with hand sanitizer.
I would have lost my mind.
I think at the point that I do you have this now that every time I see a hand sanitizer, no matter where I go, I'll just take a dollop and just
yes.
even though I did it 2 seconds ago because there was another. So I went and got a yoga mat because it's killing my back not doing my yoga on no mat. And the woman was saying, you'll be the next people to let in. So just so you know, we've got hand sanitizer stations throughout the shop. And I got very excited by that. And I was like, God, my life is so sad right now. And then and every time I turned the corner, I just was like pumping hand sanitizer, and I sanitized my hands like 20 times. I'm like, this is just insane. I've lost my mind.
Well, my other half's mom gave us like a gallon of hand sanitizer that she bought, and I bumped it when we got back. And I think it's pure alcohol. Like you could smell it, like the remnants of it I was like, I think I might be burning my skin. So they've definitely increased the alcohol content in hand sanitizer.
Hand sanitizers.
It's
just bizarre. We had a conversation in one of our happy hours, actually, Monday, of just like taking note of this moment. Like when you look back 50 years from now, like what are you going to take away from this time? And people are saying, well, I'm taking a lot of pictures, I'm taking videos, I'm writing something down. And then it got into a really interesting conversation where one of the women was saying, I don't think I need to take note. I think I'm going to remember this so clearly because it's just such a unique moment. Which is true, but then it got me thinking about our podcast, and I was like, I'm actually really grateful that we will go back and have this, like these voice memos, as a memory of just like some of the crazy stuff that we were living through. Because these are the hand sanitizer stations is 100%. I think I'm going to forget 20 years down the line, but cracks me up right now thinking about that was the world we were living in.
But will you? Because will it become normal,
or will it become completely normal?
Will that be normal that you get hosed down as you go into a shop?
and imagine our kids going, ew, you didn't used to do this? You would just touch someone else's trolley without it being clean? Oh, you're animals. And I'm just like, what?
Oh, the new normal, Tony. What will it be? What will it be?
But that's interesting because I don't know why I'm doing a parallel to this, but I just read an article, what is she called? Lisa Kudrow, who plays Phoebe Buffay in Friends.
Yes.
Because they were supposed to do a whole reunion. That's obviously put on hold. And then it resurfaced, apparently, a bunch of articles around why are we reviving a show that had 6 main characters who were all white, who were just very sexist in certain episodes, not very anti-gay, not friendly in that regard. And she had it's a very bizarre parallel that I'm doing, but she said something that was so true, which was, we should look at this show as a time capsule. It was actually pretty advanced and innovative for its time. We were doing surrogacy pregnancies. We had a wife who decided that she was gay. We had a lesbian relationship, but we should look at it as a time capsule of like, that was the time 10, 15 years ago. Like that was the America that we knew. And thank God that it's evolved, but it was just like that, just of like not judging the past too strongly, of like, that's what we knew what was best. We thought we were being innovative and smart in the time. And I can just see our kids going back going, God, you were just not clean people back in the day. Weird parallel, but I thought it was interesting.
I don't think it's a weird parallel. That lines up. Like when you think about, it's like that concept of like what aged well. Like I watched Frasier. I watched an episode of Frasier that didn't age well for me personally. But you have to watch it with that like lens of, this was aired in 87, right? So like, and I know that there are definitely things in history that you cannot look at as a time capsule, but there are some things I think you have to be flexible with it. Like,
God, and it goes back to that thing that I often, it's always top of mind, the cancel culture. Like we can't always cancel people or get pissed at people because they said something really stupid. And to your point, there are certain things. It's not a question about it being aged badly or taken out of context. It was just pure evil or bad or whatever you want it to be. But it is interesting to watch these things of how the past ages.
Well, and the other thing I'm thinking about with COVID is like the different industries and how they are having to completely change their models, move into, and like obviously the industry that you and I know very well is politics. Like, how do you change, especially a field game, right? That was door to door, engaging with voters, getting people out to the polls, being in large 50,000 person rallies, being in massive
opening your doors to strangers.
Exactly. Opening your doors to strangers. Like it's a whole industry that completely has to continue because that's how the democratic process works. But there isn't a playbook for how you do every single piece of this digitally right now. People are figuring it out as they go along. Like trial and error is here to stay. for a hot minute. And like I'm seeing folks going back to very much so, obviously phone banking was always a thing, but is now the predominant way to engage with folks. Texting has a massive increase. Like there's a lot of tactics that people are using, but it's wild.
It's going to be interesting for sure. There's a piece that you and I briefly spoke about in the New York Times by David Axelrod and David Plouffe, who I believe were both like senior strategists for the Obama campaign. And I'll tell you what I found fascinating is they were sort of saying, basically Biden right now is going to have to figure out how he projects himself into this digital world, being the least, and I think there's a Politico piece around this as well, where he is the least tech savvy, digital first candidate that we have. And they came up with like a bunch of things and tactics that he should do. And I wanted you to explain one to me, actually, that I've had. What's a surrogate in politics? They keep talking throughout this piece about deploying your surrogate. So to be effective, it doesn't only have to be on him, that he doesn't have to be alone carrying the load, and he should just deploy his surrogates. What the hell is that?
A surrogate is a predominant figure that's endorsed you, that has sway in their own geographic location or within their own industry or community. So very commonly in particular national campaigns will have kind of like a hierarchy of surrogates. So you'll have like your federal level and so in that instance, you might have Kamala Harris who's endorsed. You've also got Pete Buttigieg, right? So that whole roster of Democratic candidates that were running have all now endorsed. And so they will act as respective surrogates to pull in their voters that had confirmed to vote for them in the primary to then get out the vote for Joe in November. And that's like on the candidate level. But then when you go into local communities, that's when you have church leaders, you have chambers of commerce leaders, you have local mayors, city councillors that will endorse a presidential candidate and will act as a surrogate. It's also a really great tactic for fundraising because some people feel out of touch necessarily with national politics. So if you've got a local mayor in a town of 500,000 or 400,000 people who comes out and says, hey, this Joe Biden's my guy, this is why, please, donate whatever you can in their email list here and join me next week on a Zoom call and you'll get to meet, right, the potential president on a virtual call, which is a thing I think campaigns will keep around post-COVID-19 because you can do however many hours are in a day Zoom calls of fundraisers. Whereas if you had to fly from Massachusetts to Nebraska to Nevada to California, you could maybe do 2 in a day fundraisers. And so you're seeing this like crazy ability to reach more people, as we know with technology, in the fundraising lens. And they're using surrogates to drum up like attendees and support for that.
So it's the equivalent of your marketing influencers, basically, or tapping into your community. Because that was, they gave loads of points. This was one of them of what he should be focusing on and doing. And it was funny because, and I don't know if it's because I'm in this lens right now of just community building and building up your community, but the word community came nowhere. And the surrogacy or the surrogate word like jumped out. And I was like, maybe that's what they're referring to in that sense, which is interesting.
It is like and because the other thing with surrogates is like, they'll have different levels. So if you're a political candidate who potentially could join and be appointed as Secretary of State or whatever, there will be kind of an agreement of like, well, these are the policies that need to be hit in your administration if I come on board, right? Like there's different levels of what the agreement and commitment of surrogacy is. Like the most basic ask is send an email to your email list asking them to sign on for my email list.
And so that's tied, I guess, directly to the snowflake model of that's how you touch as many people as possible in your traditional campaign.
Exactly, yeah.
It was interesting reading all of these pieces because what kept coming up is, this like, he must have done a conference call in his basement because that keeps coming up as, we can't have the Joe Biden in just, him in his basement. That's not going to do us a world of good. And you and I know this more than anyone, I think, based on the amount of thousands of Zoom calls, no exaggeration, that we've both been on. But being a personable person and being charismatic, if you're not used to it, doing it via Zoom is really, really hard. And I think that's going to be interesting of how does that come across?
The basement thing is real. I've read so many satire pieces on him being in his basement. Yeah, like, he's running his campaign out of his basement. Which
use a Zoom background, buddy.
Any sense? Like seriously, but I haven't seen him on a Zoom, so I can't speak for it personally, but I have read a lot about people basically shitting on him for using his basement as his headquarters of his campaign. But where do they want him to be?
Yeah.
Everyone else is at home right now. Like, where do you want him to be? And I get, right, yes, you can use the Zoom background. You can maybe make it a little spicier behind you. But at the end of the day, he's delivering the same content, no matter where he is.
I guess this is where Trump has a leg up, in that with COVID, he's doing his daily briefings where he can, even though many people have a lot to say about how bad these briefings are or how unhelpful they are, but he's got prime time, I guess, in front of everyone on a daily basis. And then you've got Joe Biden, who's in his basement, which is just funny. Of how do you get past that?
Yeah. But the other thing with the current president, he has always been 5 steps ahead of the game when it comes to your digital tactics and your digital strategy. Like, I found myself doing some research probably a couple of weeks ago now, just like trying to understand the lay of the land of what his campaign was looking like. And I found myself on a subdomain of his that was giving you like step-by-step 1-minute videos of how to become a YouTube ambassador, how to become a Facebook ambassador, a Twitter ambassador, an Instagram ambassador, all of the different accounts to follow, where to physically go and click to add a picture and to add a logo to your image. Like, it's so insanely robust. Their whole like ambassador, everyone should be a part of this like ground game. And I haven't done the same research for Biden's campaign yet. It's on my docket, but like I don't believe it's out there. It's not obvious. It's not in front of my face. And honestly, Tony, that website was wild, because there was even a section of like, basically, how do you identify? Like, women for Trump, LGBTQ for Trump, veterans for Trump, of like the different subgroups that you can be a part of and the communities that they know that you can actually gain traction in, and how to represent that particular ideology on behalf of the president. And it's just, his infrastructure is
massive.
It's leaps and bounds
ahead. I think someone said that Joe Biden's digital team was 25 people, which to any European, like, that's a pretty large team. But I know for an American presidential, like, that's a pretty small team. That page that you just mentioned, Saoirse, reminds me of Theresa May's first leadership race. She did a phenomenal page. Well, not her, but she worked with Ian Patrick Hines to do that. I think it was him. Yeah, I think it was him, to do that page. And that landing page was so good because he clearly got inspired by the American model. But it was like, here are the 9 ways that you can help me win the leadership race. 1, follow me on Facebook. 2, follow me on Twitter. 2, retweet this last tweet. And it was just so clear, so basic, but so easy.
It's the basic asks that lowers the barrier to entry of someone who's trying to get involved for whatever way, shape, or form, and giving them a step-by-step of this. Oh, I didn't even realize that he was on Facebook, or that she was doing this, or exactly. And yeah, I think, yeah.
Sorry, go for it.
No, I think Biden has a long road ahead of him on figuring out how to like actually engage with folks and meet them where they're at on the social media path.
Yeah. That thing of basically taking away the what can I do? Like, that moment where you're like, I like this candidate, not sure how I can help, or not sure what I could potentially do. Like, taking that away seems so powerful and seems something that's so often overlooked. And I've got very bizarre parallels, but I did this a while ago with my husband, which was I would keep on saying, I'm happy to cook, but tell me what you want. I have no brain capacity right now to imagine what the 4 options for dinner could be. And I ended up just writing down on 12 different Post-its, here are your 12 fucking options. Just point to the one you want and I will make it. But he was just like, I don't know. I can't remember what you like cooking, I have no idea what's possible. And I was like, here, 12 options, pick the one that suits you. And that's a very weird parallel, but it's powerful. That's sort of like, here are the 10 ways you can help. That shouldn't be expected for you as a voter.
And right now, when the traditional ways that you can help are no longer normal, right? Like you can't just walk into a campaign headquarters and pick up 10 bumper stickers and give them to your friend. You can't just go in and say, hey, I'm here to help. I can knock my block this weekend. Can you give me a list of voters? Like those easier like entry points have gone.
What do you think this is going to do for obviously the digital divide that we've got, whether it's people who don't have access to the internet or people who don't have access to the latest technology and tools, or people who just are from an older generation who might not know how to get on the web? Do you think we're going to see a shift there, or do you think it's just those complexities existed before this sort of new era of we have to be digital first and digital everything for this election? Or yeah.
So I actually had a call this week with a woman who is in quarantine in Virginia. She normally lives in DC, but she moved out to Virginia, and the town that she's in, the county that she's in, doesn't have access to broadband. In Virginia, which is a bordering state of DC and Maryland. Like, so sorry, that just like came up.
No, that's interesting. Yeah.
So yeah, and like there's I don't have the numbers on this, but like there are a ludicrous percentage of people in the United States that don't actually have access to broadband.
Yeah.
And so I think you have to go old school, right? There's other tactics outside of it. So yes, you've got your phone banking. You've also got more hours in the day right now as a candidate. And yes, you should be using your surrogates, but call time is traditionally held for like very high dollar donors where you're driving from event A to event B and you're calling those folks to ask for money. That now can be flipped on its head, and you have more time to actually start to engage with folks. And we saw Elizabeth Warren doing this in the tail end of her campaign, where she'd ring someone who donated $2, or she'd ring someone who donated $10, and she'd spend, 2-3 hours out of her day calling those small dollar donors. And I think that there's a massive piece to be said there around like meeting people where they're at.
Yeah.
The other resurgence that I think we're going to see is mail. Direct mail was dead. 6 months ago, it was dead.
I thought you were saying male, like male versus female. I was like, yeah, thank you. I realized we've got another only male. But that male. Okay, got it. The other male.
That male. Yes, the one that you've forgotten about.
The one we've forgotten about. Yeah.
But that is coming back for political campaigns in particular. Like I myself have received probably 15 different pieces in the past 3-4 weeks from different candidates that are running, both local, national, and state level. So I think direct mail is going to come back really intentionally, especially when we look at expanded vote by mail infrastructure or state by state. That's a whole other conversation, but like anyone engaging with direct mail is going to, especially for those areas that are rural, I think you need to flip your strategy to make sure you're communicating with those voters in one way, shape, or form. You can no longer knock their door. So figuring out getting those mailers that are actually not just fluff mailers, but are actual persuasive mailers, right? Like you got your voter ID, you got your persuasive content, and then you've got your GeoTV content. And I think people need to make sure that they're getting that in there as much as possible, or else, we might honestly see a decrease in people coming out to the polls because they're just not sure, because they haven't been canvassed and they haven't had access to the internet. So right? Like, I think there could be a lot of danger in low turnout in 2020 if campaigns aren't able to contact the voters that they normally would have.
Do you think that door knocking is like, that's it? It's not going to happen at all?
I think it's extremely invasive for
this time, for this moment.
It's like even if you knock on the door and you've got a mask and you've got gloves on, it is extremely invasive because you have no idea if the person who answers that door has a underlying respiratory problem, or if they are surviving cancer, or they're currently going through treatment, or enter in anything here that puts them in the higher risk bucket.
And it's also a stranger knocking on your door, and now it's a stranger wearing gloves, wearing a mask. That's just, there's nothing left from that human side. Like, it's just, and you talked about getting out the vote. Like, what's top of mind for me is, will people go? Will people stand in line and so close to people? What does that look like?
Vote by mail has to be a option for people across the country. Like, that has to happen.
Popular option in the US?
It's politicized.
Talk to me about that.
Vote by mail has always existed for absentee, so people who submit that they have a disability of some sort. That means they can't get to the polls. It's been available for United States citizens that live abroad, and it's been available for the military. It's known as absentee voting. Vote by mail is the exact same thing, but is being demonized as a democratic, and I say democratic in the terms of the party, tactic to increase voter fraud. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I can see Tony's confused face. So that's why I just went, yeah. Yeah. So there's a lot of basically fear mongering of like, well, if this happens, then all of the illegal immigrants are going to vote by mail and we're never going to know who is a real voter. And like, there's just the rumor mills are galore. But, that's nothing new. There's been voter suppression in this country for ever. But will people go to the poll? Like, yeah, number one, vote by mail has to be in every single state as an option. I think number is first. Second is the people who work in polling locations tend to skew older. Those people are at the highest risk. So who's going to actually manage and work those polling locations? And then how do you make that safe for public health? Like, I don't know I know that businesses right now are looking at implementing perplex glasses in different areas of their business to be functioning. Like, I don't know what they need for physically handling of ballots, going into a closed little booth, voting, coming out of that little closed booth, giving it to the poll worker, then feeding it through a machine, right? There's a lot of touching and human contact there. And so I think it has to be re-engineered of how that can go. And the third thing I think that needs to happen is longer voting periods. It can't just be one day. It needs to be a week. People need to be able to vote over the space of a certain period of time, because that way you can ensure safety, right? And they could do, like, if you're doing it like that, you could actually do it on a precinct by precinct basis. So how many people are coming that day, right? Like, exactly, okay, there's 300,000 eligible voters in this district. We know that we're only letting this precinct vote today. So we know that only 10,000 people are eligible to vote today. That doesn't mean 10,000 people are going to show up, but like having that model, and that only works if you can spread out your voting period. So those are the three things for me that have to happen for people to feel safe to vote. And actually, the other thing I'll add to that, Tony, is like, I hope, and maybe I just have like rose-tinted glasses on, but I hope that people feel that there is enough at stake in this election to get off their ass and vote whatever way that is. So I really, really hope that we don't see a lower turnout.
It's interesting you say that. I know you and I both watched the Michelle Obama Becoming documentary. That sentence was probably one of the things that she said that stuck with me, that felt very vulnerable, very real, which was not angry at the people who voted Republican. I'm angry at the people who just didn't bother to go out and vote. Like, there's a real anger there, I think, for many people. And I get it as well. Like, the stakes are high, but also I think people are scared. And I think which is why, for me, what's been top of mind is not only, I think Biden needs to figure out, and I hate this, but a lot of the titles are like figuring out how Biden goes viral, which is just like, I'm disgusted at the fact that this is what it's come down to. I mean, it's what it's come down to. Like, our candidate has to be able to go viral. I say our candidate, the Democratic candidate, to be able to win has to go viral to even have a shot at this. I've lost my train of thought. Don't know where I was going with that.
But they do, right? They have to be this shiny, televised star who can get the highest ratings and be the most engaging. And the thing that is so scary to me, Tony, is that we live in a world that Donald Trump could refuse to believe the results. No.
Or push the elections.
Fake reporting. Oh, I can't even go there. Jared Kushner came out the other day like, we're reviewing it. I'm like, I'm sorry. What responsibility do you have as the son-in-law of the president? Okay, that makes you make decisions like that for the whole country. Oh, no. Anyway, that's not a track we should talk about.
That's where when I lost my train of thought, so you've helped me get back to it, Social, which is not only does Joe Biden have to figure out how he goes viral, how he figures out the digital landscape, but he also has to figure out how he makes people feel safe going into this election of, I need you to, it's like such a, hard ask of, I need you to do this. I need you to do your civic duty. I need you to get out there. And I know you are scared. And so what have we done what has the America done as a country, as the democratic process as a whole, but also as a candidate? What are you all doing to make sure that voters can go out and do their civic duty? The piece there about the virality, which is another parallel, but it killed me in Hillary's documentary when one of her staffers talks about how Bernie Sanders is an incredible politician and she's an incredible policymaker. And that when people say, oh, but Bernie's going to give us free healthcare. So tell us, Hillary, are you going to give us free healthcare? And she is so brilliant at this that she knows the answer will never be and can never be just a simple yes or no. And it can't be a sexy sentence of, yes, I'm going to give you free healthcare. And she goes into her 2-minute explanation of what the policy behind that is going to look like. And she's lost the voter. And I can't help but draw a parallel there with what Joe Biden is going to have to do now of like, how do you become a viral candidate? The voters, if you're doing this online, you need short, snappy sentences and cool things and something you can turn into a meme and something that you can turn into a fucking GIF. Like that's what he has to work with, which I'm just sat there going, God, I hope he has what it takes or he has the team to do that because they're going to have to flip it on his head.
Angry Bernie Sanders shouting yes and no at people is what excited folks. And that is a very sad premise.
And that's the biggest thing that I think killed me from the Hillary campaign of, oh my God, you can be an incredible policymaker and the best person for the job, but a terrible politician or a terrible candidate because you're telling the truth. You're telling people, this is probably what made me a terrible spokesperson as well, as I'd happily get on a call with a journalist and go, yeah, all of this is crazy. All of this is scary. We're all scared. Data scares people. And you'd have the comms people go, no, please stop saying that. Stop using the word scary and data in the same sentence. But it's true. You have to, how do you humanize yourself and turn yourself into a meme at the same time?
And should you have to?
And that's the big thing around content. I mean, talk about content. We had a fascinating conversation 2 weeks ago about how do you create both authentic content that's also data driven and is going to drive results. That doesn't feel authentic. That feels kind of intuitive to me.
Oh, the data model. Purchasing of data sets to achieve your outcome. And when I think about that in the political lens, because we've been on that train.
Yeah.
You're buying, or I will not say names, but in some of the political parties in the US, your model for the access to tech is you're purchasing historical data sets and IDs in particular from your previous candidates. And you're then creating your model based on that. And in a world where humans and people, consumers and voters are generally becoming more conscious of who has access to their data and what they're doing with it, do political campaigns get a free pass? Right? Like, is that okay because they're doing good? And I put that in air quotes because it's good depending on what side of the aisle you're on. Are you okay with you targeting ads at me about how negative ads at me about your opposition candidate, right? Or are you okay with targeting me with good news about you as a candidate? Where and how do you draw the line?
There's not really an answer to that. But I don't have an explanation, but I feel like I'm kind of fine with the data model and the sort of using data to identify the core people you need to talk with, if that is part of a broader strategy. If there is, but we're also building out a strong community and a grassroots team, whatever that looks like. And we're also going to be doing X, Y, and Z. The reason I say that into a broader, and I go back to the Brexit campaign on this, of the Vote Leave, all of their eggs in that basket. It was all about targeting and it was all about data. And when that campaign and that referendum was over, there was nothing left of that campaign. Those data sets had gone. That community was non-existent. Those teams, those people, just kind of vanished. And that for me made it feel even more dirty than the campaign itself. For some reason, it's a bizarre, I can't explain it, but that felt more dirty that was smokes. That was hype. It was hype. It was smoke and mirrors. It was all hype. There was no substance to it. There was no community. It was just all a bag of lies and a bag of tricks.
But that's the majority of campaigns. It dies. There's and it's much longer in this country because you can campaign
much longer.
in infinity.
But I feel like America is always campaigning, like no joke.
Yeah, 100%. But you have that, like, I'd say 8-month period where you're in constant communication with voters, and so are your opposition, right? Like, there is that period where it's so high, and then that dies, right? And like for some candidates who have 5-year terms, that dies for 4 years, right? And I remember the stat when Hillary came back in 2016 with her email list, and the natural decay of that list, because it wasn't being engaged with at that rate, was like 60 something percent. It was like 65 or 66% decay on a 4.8 million email list. Like, wild. And you're just not, there's no community there. And is that okay? Like, I don't know.
I don't even think it's okay or not okay. I don't think that model is sustainable. I don't think complete lack of community, complete lack of engagement in between campaigns. It goes back to what we were talking at the beginning of the conversation. I think in 10, 20, 30 years from now, people are going to look back on this and go, I'm sorry, wait, you didn't talk to your voters until you needed them to be elected? No, that feels wrong.
But it's a different type of conversation. Because as a candidate who becomes elected, you can't use your campaign to communicate with folks in certain ways. So you have to then represent everyone who didn't vote for you. And it's a different type of conversation, and your community is your like constituents now who you represent. But you then have to, it's basically different channels of communication, and they only get picked up when relevant. And so that community that you had in the 2016 election is going to be very different in the 2020 election as a presidential candidate for a myriad of reasons.
I think that's it. Like, that's, for me, that feels like the long-term game to try and solve. And we had this constantly. I mean, I had this in Europe because the time frame is much shorter. But we had, candidates for 2016, 2017 French presidential candidates that came to us with lists from 2012. And we're like, no way, you're not using them. It's going to kill your reputation. It's going to kill our reputation as an ESP and as an email provider. It's not going to happen. And these people don't exist anymore. Like, it's like the digital life cycle of these people has disappeared. But I do, it's just with human beings as a whole. Here's another thing, human beings as a whole, but specifically men, are very, very bad at the long-term commitments, at the long-term strategy and long-term thinking. And the only reason why I know this is when we were building out a sales team at one of my old companies, it was we need a 50-50 of women and men, because the men are very good at the short-term deals and very good at holding a lot of those and close them pretty quickly. And the women are phenomenal at building out long-term deals. I personally worked on a deal for more than 3 years. And there's something there around, we need more female candidates because they're good, I think, at building out communities, and they're good at the long-term strategy, which the men just seem terrible at right now. That's probably a load of bullshit, but I don't know. That's where my mind went to.
No, I think it was Wall Street Journal did a piece on all of the countries with female leaders and the data as it relates to coronavirus. And like, look, there's a million factors that go into that, but that being women-led, very different outcomes, just gives me hope.
Not even very different, much better outcomes. Let's be real here.
Oh, completely. New Zealand.
Yeah.
Belgium. Literally like functioning back to normal. And again, smaller populations, smaller countries.
We're comparing apples to pears.
Exactly. Yeah. Different healthcare infrastructure. They actually have a healthcare infrastructure. Let me rephrase that. But there's something to be said about the skill set of female leaders, of empathy, of humility, of facilitation that allows and enables, one, a multitude of voices at the table. And what you're saying there, Tony, of that long-term strategy, being able to plan for whatever's ahead and not just be in the moment of what feels right in this 30 seconds to our current president in the United States of what's going to be a good goddamn sound bite.
That's it.
For the super fans, also known as my mum and dad, thanks for staying with us right through the end, and appreciate it. If you would like to, follow us along at www.unapologeticwomen unapologetic.co, even though I already know you know that. You've got it bookmarked.